Hi. In this video, we will be creating a capacitor mobile app with the Bootstrap framework. I'm going to name this app Mobile Demo. An index page is automatically created for us with a default view. You can rename the view if you want to. Next, go to Project Settings to add other required frameworks you may be needing for this project. It's good to do this at the beginning of every project. Next, go to App Info to give your app a name and a package name. You can also update your app name and package name in the capacitor.config.json file. Or type npx cap init in the command line. Next, we need to confirm that we are running the latest version of Capacitorjs. Wappler automatically install version 3.6.0 for us. We need to update to the latest version to get the best experience. Nice, we are now running the latest version. You can now proceed to add the platforms you need for this project. You will notice two more folders are now added to our project folder for Android and iOS. Now that we are done setting up our mobile app project, let's now create the backend for it. This will be a web project. Choose your server model and development environment. Next, head to Project Settings to set up your project. I have decided to change my development environment to Docker and add a Postgres database. I need some sample data to work with, so I won't toggle the No Sample Data option. Everything looks good. The database I set up come with some default tables and data we can use for this project. If your database is showing errors or the tables are not showing, do not panic. Just refresh the database, go to Project Settings and resave the project, or simply close and reopen Wappler. For this project, I only need the users table and the countries table. I will add a password field to the users table as I need login functionality in this project. I will also create a default password for one of the users. In real life, passwords should be encrypted. In Server Connect, add a security provider and choose the users table, specify the username field and the password field. Create a login API action. Also create a username and password post variable, then add a login step. The username and password post variables are used by the login step by default. If you use different names for the variables, make sure you bind the login step username and password input to those variables. I will change the Remember Me field value to 1. This will enable persisted login. In your app, this value may be coming from a checkbox input in the app if you decided to let the users choose. I will create a countries API action to list all the countries in the database. This will be coming from a paged query. I will come back to set the limit and offset get parameters. For now, I will enable debug mode so I can't be able to see web server logs. We need to also create an API action to get current user data, add a security provider step, then filter the users table with the identity of the security provider step. Now let's switch back to our mobile project. I will add a new page called Home. I'm setting its route to the root path with the / because I want it to be the first page to load in the view. You will notice also that its main page is the index page. This is because all pages loads in the view in the index page. I will start creating the header of the page to display the user's name and their profile picture. If you are new to creating layouts in Bootstrap, I recommend you watch my beginners video series. I will add a server connect element to get the current user data. When you click the select server action, a dialog appears. Select the backend we created in the top right corner of the dialog, then select the current user API we created. Now bind the image to the current user avatar and the text to the current username. If you are trying to bind and you see nothing to bind to, do not panic, it simply means Wappler is not seeing the view. Close the pages and reopen Wappler. Now I will create a login page. I will add Wappler's already created login block to the page and update the input names to match the post variables in the login API action I created in the backend. Convert the form to Server Connect form and select the login API action we created in the backend as its action. Set the Submit button's type to Submit so it submits the form when tapped. Now let's add a global browser component in the index page. I will name it browser_main. Before we proceed, I need to explain how routing works when working with Bootstrap mobile app in Wappler. Add a link element to the index page, set its route to the login page route. Checking the internal checkbox option is optional, it means we want to navigate to the login page without reloading the whole app. Open the index page in the browser. You will notice we cannot see the home page elements in the page, it's because its content are dynamic. Click the link to navigate to the login page, you will observe there is an extra hash and exclamation mark. The app uses hash routing. Now let's add a button element to the page, add a dynamic click event to it to navigate to the login page when it is tapped using the browser component. Choose the route and prepend index.html #! This is because Wappler has not modified the browser component for app connect routing and mobile app creation, hence the extra step. Now let's try it without prepending index.html !! Without prepending index.html !! It does not navigate because it's treating the app like a website. Now you know how to use the browser component to navigate when creating Bootstrap mobile app in Wappler. Moving on, let's add a success event to the login form to navigate to the home page when login is successful. We need to check if the identity returned by the security provider step in the current user API action step is equal to false, then redirect to the login page. If not, we stay in the home page. Normally, we can't output the security provider step. In order to get its value, we will use a set value step to output the identity value. Add a page flow to the page, then check if its value is equal to false, then redirect to the login page. Awesome. Next thing we need to do is to enable curse, then enter our app web origin. Because I'm planning to allow multiple origins, I need to enter the origins in an array. Wappler currently doesn't allow entering comma-separated origins, so we need to enter this manually in the config.json in the config folder located in the app folder in our file manager. If you are using Docker, you also need to do the same in your targets in the .wappler folder. Later we can easily add other origins. At this time, logging in will not work. We need to enable credentials property of our login form and also for the server connect element getting our current user data. You should do the same every time you are working with the security provider. Awesome. Our user is now logged in. We can solve our current user avatar issue by prepending our web server URL to the image path. Awesome. Now let's display the list of countries from the Countries API action. Follow along. Now add a new Server Connect element for the Countries API. We need to add the limit and offset get parameters to our Countries API. I will switch to the backend to do that. Now let's complete our UI, then select the Countries API. Now let's select the Countries API. We also need to add a variable that will hold the query limit. Convert the country's row to repeat children, bind to the data of the country's API. I will adjust the repeater a little bit and bind the country code and country name text. Awesome. Since we have over 200 records to display, we need to have a way to let the users know when the records is loading. I will add an inline broder spinner below our repeater that will show whenever the country's API is executing. We also need a way to increase the limit of the country's API query. I will add a browser component to the page. Make sure you give it a name distinct from the name of the browser component in the index page. I will add a dynamic scroll event to the browser component to increase the limit of the country's API. If we attempt to scroll now, it won't work. The page has to be longer than the current device height before the scroll event can trigger. Let's increase the current limit. You can also add a debounce to read intents. Awesome, we can barely see the spinner because the query loads quickly. You can change the debounce as much as you want until it looks perfect to you. Or you can remove the debounce completely to make the user feel like they are scrolling. It will feel smoother. Let's preview our app on Android and iOS emulators. We won't be able to load our localhost web server API data on Android as it currently allows only HTTPS connection, but on iOS simulator it's fine. However, you can use tools like ngrok to get HTTPS URL for your local web server. I will also start an iOS simulator in the background. Inspecting the Android simulator in the browser's console, you will notice the Android emulator didn't attempt to load the API data. This is because our connection is not secure. Now let's switch to iOS simulator. The app didn't also load in the iOS simulator. We can inspect the cause of the issue in the Safari Dev Tools. It looks like we have a CURS issue. Copy the iOS origin. We need to include it in the list of CURS origin in the backend. For your reference, I will also include the origin for Android. These are the default origins Capacitor uses for Android and iOS. We can now switch back to our iOS simulator. Just refresh the app. Awesome. Let's change our flow that redirects to login page. I feel it's not efficient. I am going to run this with the current user server connect element done event. This will make the flow run when the API is fully loaded. That's better. Next, I will create a page to get a country data. It's just a basic page to get a particular country and a back button to go back to home page. First, I will create the back button function. If you have been doing web development in Wappler, you will probably expect me to use the referer URL to go back here. If I do that, it will always take me back to the home page, irrespective of how many pages are in the history. The browser component is not optimized for mobile app development yet. I will create a separate JavaScript file for this. Because I will be filtering data, I need to include the ID param in the country data page URL. In the back end, let's create the query to filter the countries. Now add the new API to the page. Another different thing is how we get route parameters when creating Bootstrap mobile app in Wappler. Query params won't work here. We need to add a route element to the page and paste the page path in its path attribute. Now create a click event to navigate to the country data page when one of the countries is clicked. Now include the JavaScript file we created in the index page so our back functionality can work. Awesome, the back icon is not showing. To fix this, make sure that you are using the same version of Font Awesome on the index page and on your content page. Now that's better. Glad you made it to this point. If you haven't subscribed, please do and turn on post notifications so you don't miss the next video. Thanks for watching.